Once again, we're talking with Rabbi Leib Tropper, and we are continuing our discussion about the Chazon Ish and his outlook on life and his mandates to us. How did the Chazon Ish look upon the implementation of Chesed and the implementation of Midos? What was his mandate to us?
That's an issue that's really important for all of us, and for me especially, and for others, I guess, who could join me in this internalization of this concept, the way the Chazon Ish presents it to us. I mean, these are probably more serious than the other things we spoke about last week of the Chazon Ish, or I can't measure them in the seriousness, but it feels it's more serious. The Chazon Ish writes the following. I think it's in also Chelik Aleph. He writes, if you decide to help someone when he needs it, Roi lasois besimcha. It's not only about saying L'shem Yichud Kutchabricha when you shake a lulav in the nesrig, which people do when they go L'shem Yichud or L'shem Yichud, however they pronounce it. When they sit in the sukkah and they go and the mamish sit in the sukkah and they look around and they have enough in the sukkah and they really enjoy it and they're so joyful because they know they have to do the besimcha. Shofar, they run to your shofar, and other mitzvahs. So the Chazon Ish says, but chesed, the same thing. He says, if you want to help someone, ikra asiyas mitzvah of chesed, hu simchosa shezachinu lekach. We should be as with the same gemutlichkeit in Hungarian, or German, I think. And gemutlichkeit means the warmth that you do the other mitzvahs. The same gemutlichkeit you should have when you do this chesed for someone. It should be done with a passion, with patima, as a Hungarian language. It's meaningful passion that you feel excited about doing somebody a favor, as sometimes we do it and we feel forced, and we act forced, and display this feature of being forced. It's depicted all over our face that we're being forced to do the chesed. It should be roi lasos besimcha, like any other mitzvah. And that's, I think, a very hard thing to do, because you're really right in the middle of having a dinner with your best friend, and you have to go and you want to do something. You're ready to help somebody with. You feel like, why do you bother me and leave me alone? Or somebody comes to ask you for tzedakah, and you say, come on, can you leave me alone and give me a minute's peace, and give me a minute to rest, a minute to breathe? I can't. I mean, Chazon Ish says, when you do chesed, if you decide to do it, you can't give a person a nuisance fee. Here's $10 and go away. Here's $10. It just has to be done b'simcha. I heard once from my Rabbi, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, one of the Poiski had door in America, Marana Rav Tuvia Goldstein, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, he said he heard it from Bachano Masamin. The Gemara says in Bava Basra, the Yud Aleph, the Gemara says, Anoisem Pruto Lo'ani Misborech B'Sheish. If you give money to a poor man, you get 6 blessings. And if you console him or her and tell them, listen, I know it's difficult for you, Mishishem soon will be better. If I keep my eyes open for you, if I find a job that's available for you, I'll try to help you find it. And if I say biyud alog, it's 11 brachas. Why does he get 11 brachas? Why does she get 11 brachas? Is it because they're making him feel better? Is it because they're giving something more than money to the recipient? So Rabbi Chanan said, I don't know if that's the reason, but I know another reason, that maybe perhaps a more important reason. When you give money to an ani, to a poor man who needs the money, you're giving him tzedakah, you're helping him. But when you give him this consolation and chizuk, you're giving him life, you're giving him time, your time. Your time. You're giving him your time. You're giving him a life. You're giving him your life when you give him time. What is life? An accumulation of moments, of hours, of days. For that you get Yud Aleph brachas.
Beautiful. What was the Chazon Ish's greatest pleasure in life? What did
Chazon Ish writes, actually, it's fantastic. You asked me the question. I just saw it like last week. I have a kind of regular seder looking up things in the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish, I must tell you that the Chazon Ish approach is very iconoclastic in a lot of his things. We'll soon see that even in certain halachas that he has, he's not afraid, or he's not shy. That's a better word. I don't know, not afraid, not shy of voicing his opinion, though it may not be common understanding by other poskim. And I'm not saying we even paskin like the Chazon Ish, but the fact that he felt strong enough to speak it, that is a healthy iconoclasm. You know what I mean? It really is. So he said, "Nene ani l'sameach libois b'nei odom My pleasure in life is to make other people happy. And my biggest pain is to make somebody unhappy even for 1 second. I mean, we have to imagine that. How many times a day we can make our spouse unhappy, our friends unhappy. I mean, it's an effort. We know that he was married for 60 plus years. At the funeral of his wife, he said, talk to her. He said, you know that if it wasn't for the halach in Shulchan Aruch that says requires asking mechila from your spouse, I wouldn't be asking you mechila, because we never had a disagreement in 60 plus years. But I'm required to, so I'm going to do it. Ad hechen advar magiyim. I think I once mentioned this, that the Gemara says in Chagiga, al kol nelam yovi b'mishpat. It says in Koheles, on all hidden things a person will have to be judged upon. The Gemara says, what is the hidden thing? A person who spits in front of his friend and makes him feel uncomfortable. So that you also is din v'cheshbon. So Reb Shlomo Zalman, his wife would sit at the other side of the table, and he would eat the chicken, and then there would be the bones left. He didn't want his wife to be, just kind of feel uncomfortable with someone else's bones. So he would go and throw it out himself. He refused to let his wife do that.
We had mentioned, Rabbi Leib, that the Chazon Ish was very careful while he would help people. He himself understood that it was not a good thing to ask other people repeatedly for favors for oneself. And Rabbi Leib said that this was a kabbalah that he received from the Chofetz Chaim. And any specific instances, or can you elaborate on that idea of not coming on to people, not asking people for things, although we know by fundraising it's certainly admirable, but when it came to asking people for personal favors, it was something that he was very much against based on his kabbalah from the Chofetz Chaim. Can you help us understand
Well,
that?
actually, the Chazon Ish, I don't know if he elaborates on that, but he actually talks about the consequences of being what he calls rogel, to ask bakoshes from one's friend or from people in general. In Kuf Lamed Daled and Chilek Gimel, I'm going to read you the words actually so we can understand this. Imritzoncha levakesh davar me'esh reyacha. If you have a wish, desire to ask someone from your friend or from your acquaintance, shkoil bepelas, weigh it seriously. Im tofik bakashoscha. If he will respond, he will give in, or if he'll execute your request. But al toimar, and do not say to yourself, Mami neyaluch. What difference does it make, really? What kind of thing could happen? How bad could it be if he rejects my request? What's so terrible about it? Da! No, he says, the Chazon Ish says, Ki harbei hifsadeta b'maasecha. Your asking is an action that causes great loss. Ki eincho batuach ba'atzmecha. You can't be secure that when he tells you, I cannot do it, that you don't have any ha'oras, awakening of kas believe. You may be say, he doesn't want to do it because maybe this or maybe that, or excuses that he doesn't like me as much, or maybe he just, who knows what. You're not sure on his oras kas believe, your own personal awakening of anger. Al miyun achicha, on his rejection of your request, or your brother requested your bakasha. Gam believe reacha, and also on the one that you asked, your friend. Misgane sneaks in a feeling that you are upset with him probably because I'm not giving you what I want. So two people are upset, could be upset. Va'ato, what did you do? Ben achim, here father, between loving brothers, you created a wedge. V'harbesa sinas chinam, all of a sudden it blossoms into sinas chinam. Umi, then he adds on this final word, and really want people to say this to themselves. Whoever finds that they want to learn something from the Chazon Ish. Umisha dvorov kalim v'rogel b'bakoshes. Someone who finds it easy to ask, and he's accustomed to asking things from other people all the time. Who sonei, he ends up hating, v'soni, and being hated. Like you mentioned before, the person rejects, then you hate him. He thinks that you're upset at him, and he says, what's this guy nudging me all the time for at least favors? So you end up being hated and hating others. That's the Chazon Ish's view on somebody who's rogel b'bakashos.
He was very iconoclastic, as you mentioned, in a number of areas, and that in particular that you mentioned. And the stories that people tell about tzaddikim, sometimes people think that the story itself makes the person, but as you've said, Rabbi Leib, it's the person that makes the story. And one of the things that you've mentioned about the Chazon Ish is that he said something very interesting, which was very iconoclastic, is that most people are not a refined midos, which is an amazing thing to say. And he said, but nonetheless, a person should understand that you still have to not only be nice to them, but honor them.
Right. It's one of the things I really, I'm always nervous, like I said at the beginning, before to you, that I'm nervous about sharing with people because, it's only because of the negi, it's my own personal interest. It's hard for me to mekayim this is really hard for me. I don't know. And I guess we have to grow into it. I'm not sure if it's easy for me or it's the timely thing for me to do at this point. Chazon Ish writes, it's actually in Perek Daled in Emunah B'Tochen. It's not in the Igris. He writes, he says, Roiv b'nei ha'odom eina b'nei atzili hamidis. Majority of people are not a refined character. And why are you expecting them to act with character if they just don't have this refined character? So the Chazon Ish, in a sense, his accusation or his critique is on the one who's expecting that you shouldn't have this expectation. What could you expect from them? What could you demand from them? Still along with all that kind of deficit that the person has in the midas, he owns for them, he holds on to for them, covered v'yakar, honor and glory and nice feelings. I mean, Paris, I'm speaking to you now. You know how difficult that can be. So it's a thing that I could say, in all honesty, something to aspire for. Maybe in the Chazon Ish's time, or for the Chazon Ish person himself, as the Gemara says, but V'atu Hashem l'kecha ma Hashem shel me'imach. Kim liyira. The Gemara says, Otu yira milsa zutra sehi. Is yira such a easy? What am I asking? I'm asking to fear Hashem. So the Gemara asks, is yira such a simple thing to ask? What do you mean? All I'm asking. So the Gemara says, in Gabi Moshe milsa zutra sehi. The Moshe is a small thing. Similarly, because that's Chumash and this is just Musa the Chazon Ish, but the Chazon Ish probably was something that he easily could do. Chazon Ish could be Soivel or Malam Ayin. He's diamond to the Eibishter's midah of being Soivel, tolerating and turns his face away from these kind of things. But for us, we have to cultivate that kind of realness to our behavior, not just artificial acting out what the Chazon Ish did.
I understand, Rabbi Leib, that he had a very strong daya on an area that is obviously vitally important to Klal Yisrael, and that is funds which are distributed through yeshiva. Who makes the decision on how the money should be used and how it's distributed? One might think that, of course, it's a clear-cut answer, it's the administrator, but he had a very different opinion about that.
Right. It's a fascinating question you asked me, because I remember this many, many years ago. Chazon Ish, if I could find it right this moment, it is in the Chelek Gimel. I think it pretty much was the Chelek Gimel. Chazon Ish writes that the decision of every penny, dispensation of money, spending in a ruchnistic meisid, it belongs and is part of the ruchnistic decisions. An administrator who pushes papers, who signs people onto a program for government assistance, is not the one to make the decisions on dispensation of funds. Is the person either a designated Adam, Talmud Chacham, Ruchnistic, a person that should do it, or it should be the Rosh Yeshiva himself who's to do it. But it should not be anybody who's just an administrator. They're Ruchnistic decisions. If I had the
administrator is obviously a Ruchnistic.
Actually, I just have it. I just found it right over here. I'll read it to you because I think it's better that I read it so people could. And it's a Michtav Samachtes in Chelek Gimel. Miskabe Dani, I'm honored to tell you the following. Chalukas haksofim shel kupas hayeshiva lepruti yosel. The dispensation of the funds of the kupas hayeshiva, of the tzedakah fund, not tzedakah fund, the kupas hayeshiva, the money of the yeshiva, to its smallest detail. He bichlal ha'anholo haruchnis shel hayeshiva. That's the spiritual administration of the moisid. It doesn't belong to just an administrator. Ubefeirish I told the person that we're establishing this new yeshiva, on top of these administrators needs to be somebody, somebody who was totally absorbed, saturated from his youth, with the ruchnistic flavor. So that pretty much is a different. Like you said, this is a word repeating over again, but it's like kind of classic in his approach.
Something else related, not necessarily related to the Chazon Ish, but you mentioned the idea of things that are pertaining to the ruchnius of yeshiva. Something which some people might not associate with the ruchnius of the yeshiva, but according to some Gedolim really is the concept of secular studies. What do some of our...
You mean secular studies in the program within the yeshiva?
Within the context of the yeshiva, obviously. That there's a certain prevailing attitude in some places, but there are some Gedolei Torah, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zt'l, who had a very strong opinion about the connection of secular studies to ruchnius.
Maran Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, who I was, besides being the namesake of the yeshiva, he also was the head of the board of directors of the Mossad, and he also was my neighbor for 4 years. And I had spent Shabbosim in his back of his house before he was giving his Pirkei of his shir. I had the privilege to do that. It somehow, maybe this is common that people tend to make things sound a certain way for their own convenience. But I will tell you what Rabbi Yaakov said, and people know this, and in Muncie, I'm sure people are familiar with this. In his own Philadelphia yeshiva, at one point, they implemented Rabbi Yaakov's shita about this. Rabbi Yaakov Zechron Levracha was not in favor of the way people handled today's secular studies. They go just to be yaitza, just to be yaitza means just to get a passing mark and just do it and study, cram it in like the last day. And Rabbi Yaakov Zt'l made it very abundantly clear that people who do not do well in school deliberately, in other words, they don't come, they show up, they pay attention, they fall asleep, they scribble. He says, if you go, one must try to do his best. If not, it is the Aveira Chamura of Bittul Torah. Either you go and you do your best and you pay attention, or otherwise don't go and don't be able to serve Bittul Torah. I think that's pretty severe and harsh, yet very important. It's not harsh in a way that is too difficult to handle. I mean, some Gedolim had expectations. It's not like today. Everybody is walking around. Automatically is born as like fragile. Everybody supposedly is like, be careful, don't break, handle with care. The only handling of care that I know is that we all grew up as children. Our parents had expectations from us. Our Rabbi had expectations from us. We need something. People should have some expectations from us, and they don't have to always walk around making believe that the fragility is so strong. It's so fragile. You say anything to a Talmud, you say to him, "Listen, I think you should be punished." Oh, you should be punished. I don't know. What happened? People, there is a concept of schar v'einish. And I don't want to talk about. I know somebody told me that he doesn't want to say the ani mamas because he doesn't want. This is somebody, an old man. He's like 40, 45. Because there's a tzchar v'einish. Hashem pays all those, rewards those who give those mitzvahs, and God forbid punishes those who do averis. I don't want to hear that. I don't want any negativity in my life. I mean, what does that mean? I mean, it sounds like they want to avoid reality, and they want to avoid that. It's real. I mean, that is the reality. Well, perhaps. Somebody once said, I say this in jocular form, but maybe some people can't handle reality, and for them, as the old adage goes, which was humorous, reality is only for people who can't handle drugs. I meant that in jocular form. I don't mean that seriously, but right. I just get the feeling sometimes when people would say that, I don't want to hear, but schar v'einish. We don't want to take drugs in your life and make believe that's not reality. What do you want to escape? That is the reality. There's Yud Gimel Karim. There are psukim in the Chumash Dvarim, and Breshis, and Shmois, and Vayikra, and Bamidbar Dvarim of schar v'einish. Now, of course, we could justify and say there's a certain amount of Nishba. We don't know. We could mitigate some of the einish, but to eliminate the concept of schar v'einish and call it like this Judaism has too much imposition in the way of reward and punishment. It just not. I can't go into it. What do you mean can't go into it? I mean, you want truth. Everything has. I mean, if you cross a red light and the cop catches you, you pay a fine. You don't say, "I want to tell you something. I'm not into negativity." I mean, life is everything. In life is doing that. If you go and you do things if you play fraudulent with money and something, you end up paying a price for it. I mean, that's the way it is.
Indeed, it is. Rabbi, thank you once again for sharing those insights with us.
I do want to share perhaps just one psak of the Chazon Ish to make people more, I could say, one word is calm, but to perhaps temper the anxiety of certain people regarding a particular behavior. Somebody asked the Chazon Ish about hatavas chaloim. You know what hatavas chaloim is, Perzel? Hatavas chaloim is, you say when you have a dream that you don't like, it's an undesirable dream, a scary dream, so right away people run to get hatavas chaloim. And it's interesting that in certain families or shittis in yeshivas, they can risk the very makbet hatavas chaloim a number of times, all kinds of things. The Chazon Ish's reaction was very, very, perhaps just the opposite. He said, when I have that happen to me, I don't pay attention to it. Just I say the good Yehirotzen by Yom Tov, when they say Yehirotzen by Nesias Kapayim, have kavanah by Yehirotzen. It could be a lot of things. I think the Chazon Ish once said to someone, Baal Peh, I've seen this in Sforim, if you sleep with your hand on your heart, you could do that. A lot of times, what you think about at night, the Gemara says, is thinking, Hurei Ayoyim, it's reverberations of the day's thoughts. So therefore, hence, if somebody has an experience, let's say that somebody beat him up, and then he has a dream, you don't have to have a tavas chalaim, he has a nightmare from that, because that's obviously comes from when he had experience during the day. Somebody lost money and he has nightmares of poverty. It's all reverberations of the day's incident that took place. So the Chazon Ish was not a proponent of running after, like every time he had a bad dream, to get nervous about it and get upset. He was more like, again, kind of classically favored a good kavan in the Yehirotzen by Nesias Kapayim.
Leib, again, we want to thank you for helping us to comprehend those very serious words of the Chazon Ish, words to live by.
And hope to continue.
Amen.
Thank you.